Tonight on NewsWatch, preventing attacks here at home. Could law enforcement have done more to stop the Boston Marathon bombing? Plus, free to display their faith. We talked to the Texas cheerleaders about their win in court. And the explosive danger that could be in a landfill near your home. All this and more tonight on NewsWatch. Could the Boston Marathon bombings have been prevented? Good evening. I'm Mark Martin. That was the question raised today on Capitol Hill. George Thomas has been following the first of many congressional hearings on the bombing, and he joins us now from the newsroom with more. George.
Yeah, big questions, Mark. The House Homeland Security Committee is looking into what happened before and after the attacks, what signs may have been missed, and what can be done to make sure something like this never happens again.
3 weeks after the Boston Marathon terrorist attack,
the Committee on Homeland Security will come to order.
Congress wants answers.
Anyone who thinks they can execute an attack on this country and change our way of life greatly underestimates our spirit and our resolve.
The first of what will likely be several congressional hearings on the attack began today in Washington. And right off the bat, new revelation showed a breakdown in intelligence sharing. Boston City Police Commissioner said officials didn't know until 3 days after the bombing that the older brother, Tamerlan Tsarnaev, had been flagged by the intelligence community.
My fear is that the Boston bombers may have succeeded because our system failed. We can and we must do better.
In 2001, Russia asked the FBI and CIA to look into Tsarnaev's possible ties to radical Islamists. U.S. investigators found nothing and closed its case. Again, that piece of information was never shared with the Boston police.
Would you have liked to have known that information?
In hindsight, certainly.
Equally concerning to lawmakers is the emerging narrative from the White House. The administration continues to downplay the threat posed by radical Islamists.
From the attack at Fort Hood to the tragedy at Benghazi, the Boston bombings are our most recent reminder that we must call terrorism really for what it is in order to confront it.
Former Senator Joe Lieberman says violent Islamic extremism is alive and well, and the government needs to do more to counter it.
I believe that though it would not have been easy, it was possible to have prevented the terrorist attacks in Boston.
And Mark, one other note, the body of Boston bombing suspect Tamerlan Tsarnaev has been buried in an undisclosed location outside Massachusetts. Police said in a statement today that, quote, a courageous and compassionate individual came forward to bury the body. Mark?
Thank you, George. In other news, gun control advocates continue to push for tougher restrictions, but a recent study shows that gun violence is actually decreasing in the U.S. The federal government reveals gun-related homicides are down 39% from their peak in 1993. Another report by the Pew Research Center found a drop of 49%. Both reports indicate non-fatal crimes involving guns were down by about 70% over that same period. CBN News has been following this story from the beginning. Just yesterday, a judge ruled that cheerleaders from a Southeast Texas high school can continue to display Bible verses on banners at football games. Paul Strand has more on the decision.
Last fall, an atheist group filed a complaint with the Kuntz, Texas school superintendent and said the scriptures on sports banners should not be allowed. But the cheerleaders argued that was a violation of their free speech and filed a lawsuit. Now a judge has ruled that cheerleaders have the right to display their faith messages. This all began when these Christian cheerleaders got tired of the same old negative banners displayed at the start of football games.
You know, in years past, the cheerleaders have had messages like, beat the Bears or kill the Cougars, things like that.
Attorney Justin Butterfield was a point man for the Liberty Institute in representing the cheerleaders. He says they began to display positive, encouraging scriptures. But some felt that crossed the line, supposedly separating church and state.
To be a violation of separation of church and state, The message actually has to come from the government. And in this case, the message has always been the cheerleaders. The cheerleaders came up with the idea themselves. The cheerleaders developed the messages themselves. The cheerleaders wrote the banners themselves on banners that the cheerleaders paid for themselves.
In fact, the school district was trying to stop the cheerleaders, which angered Liberty Institute's general counsel.
This is just another example where the government is telling people what they can and cannot say. Well, that's not America. That's why we have a First Amendment.
Mateer says students need to stand up for their religious rights.
As the Supreme Court has recognized, they don't lose their constitutional rights at the schoolhouse doors. I mean, these girls are standing up for that. And so this case is important because it's, again, telling the government, look, you can't tell people what to say or what to think.
The battle over the banners lasted 7 months. Paul Strand, CBN News.
Our chief political correspondent David Brody recently traveled to Texas to report on the banners. After the ruling came down, he caught up with some of the cheerleaders from the case via Skype. David asked their reaction when they learned of the verdict.
We were relieved, and we were really thankful that the judge ruled in our favor, because we know that God was definitely in that and working in his heart.
Kiera, what about you? What is this like? Does this surprise you at all, or you felt confident all along here?
I think there were times when I was kind of scared, I guess, of what the ruling might be, but when I got scared, I just prayed, and I knew that God was going to work it out.
Hey, Macy, I want to ask you about how you see God in all of this.
Well, I just think, that whatever happens, it is his will. And so even if we didn't get through, if it wasn't in our favor, then it was still what God wanted to happen.
Is there just anything that's going to change next year at all, or are you just going to continue on?
We're going to definitely continue making our signs. We'll probably talk about them this summer sometime.
What about, have you heard from anybody since the ruling came down? Like, I know the governor, Rick Perry, put out a statement, and there's been the attorney general I know you guys met with. Have you been hearing from anybody, or has it just been, what's been the reaction? Have you heard from anybody at all?
On the support page on Facebook, there's been a lot of celebration and praises to God going up about this. And of course the Attorney General and the Governor. So we're thankful for all of the support from the community.
What has this taught you about the process here in terms of, speaking up for your rights, especially your religious liberty rights? And you guys are learning a valuable lesson. Are there some lessons that you're drawing from this at all, either one of you?
I think the most important lesson is that, if you believe in something, then you should stand firm in it and don't back down just because someone says you can't do it.
Good for them. Well, to see more of David's interview, you can visit our website, cbnnews.com. Some Christian leaders say they won't support immigration legislation that includes a gay rights amendment, a measure allowing gay couples to sponsor their partners for U.S. residents is being considered as part of a larger immigration bill. But the Southern Baptist Convention says if it makes it into the measure, the group will no longer back the reform. Other groups like the National Association of Evangelicals have made similar statements. Later on NewsWatch, we'll get insights on immigration reform from the president of the National Hispanic Christian Leadership Conference. Stick around for that. Child advocates in Colorado say the state's latest attempt to regulate marijuana does not go far enough to protect young people. On Wednesday, lawmakers in Denver passed legislation to regulate the marijuana market. That after voters approved its legalization last year. Supporters say the legislation will effectively control the drug, and the governor says he plans to sign it. But child advocates say the bills do nothing to limit potency or ban the sale of marijuana-laced cookies, candy, and drinks.
I understand you want to make marijuana palatable for adults, but really I think there's a subjective line that's being crossed because these lollipops and sodas and cupcakes are very popular with kids.
Dr. Christian Thurstone directs one of the state's largest substance abuse treatment clinics for youth. He says their marijuana referrals have doubled since last fall. Little scary there. Well, the man suspected in those Ohio kidnappings made his first court appearance today. The one-time Cleveland school bus driver is accused of keeping 3 women captive for the past decade. He's facing charges of kidnapping and rape. Charlene Israel reports.
Ariel Castro didn't utter a word during his court appearance today. He kept his eyes on the ground as prosecutors described the horrors he put Michelle Knight, Gina DeJesus, and Amanda Berry through.
They were bound and restrained and sexually assaulted.
Castro didn't enter a plea or acknowledge the judge when his bond was set at $8 million. Police say the women endured years of rape, isolation, and beatings, allowed outside the home only twice in 10 years. Knight, the oldest victim, said she was pregnant 5 times, telling police that Castro punched her stomach repeatedly to force a miscarriage. Today, we hear for the first time the recordings from police radios when responding officers realized they found the women who had been missing for so long.
We found them. We found them.
Berry and DeJesus are home with their families today.
It was just hugging and kissing and crying.
Michelle Knight is still recovering in the hospital. Investigators say Ariel Castro is cooperating in custody. His 2 brothers will not face charges at this time. Charlene Israel, CBN News.
Coming up, the immigration debate. Are Americans really paying attention to the heated battle in Washington?
My feet hurt, your feet hurt. White hot pain, I wanna cry. Is there anything I can try?
Why, yes! Introducing Strut Soul Angels, the human shock absorber that helps alleviate foot pain.
The first 10 steps in the morning to the bathroom were excruciating. Within 3 days after I put Struts on, it's been such a relief.
Slipped it on and almost immediately I felt a support, kind of like a pillow underneath my arches.
The Struts Soul Angel provides a great amount of relief and support throughout the course of the day, providing shock absorption and relief of pain.
On your feet without proper support can be painful. Strut Soul Angels promotes better balance, control, and body alignment. Standing in your heels all day is painful, but slip on Struts and you'll enjoy comfort and support 24/7. Struts is so versatile, you'll wear them in every shoe you own, even barefoot.
I'm on my feet all the time. I teach 11 and 12-year-olds. The pain was so much that I knew I had to do something. And with the Struts, I can do my job and enjoy my job.
I usually am on my feet from 8 to 12 hours a day. When I wear my Struts, it's like giving my feet a hug all day.
It's life-changing. I wear them from the minute I get up to the minute I go to bed.
Why pay $400 for custom orthotics?
Now get Strut Soul Angels for just $10. You also get Miracle Foot Repair Cream, absolutely free. Use it to help relieve dry, calloused feet overnight. But wait, call right now and we'll double the offer free. Just pay separate processing and handling. Plus, you get a 100% money-back guarantee. If not completely delighted, send it back. But keep the foot cream as our gift just for trying. You get it all. A $70 value for just $10.
Oh, yes! Love my Struts, the best thing since sliced bread. They heal pain from toes to head. Get yours now, your doctor said.
Struts, be nice to your feet. Call now.
Call 1-800-787-1580 and get your Struts and Miracle Foot Repair for just $10 and we'll double the offer. That's 1-800-787-1580 or visit getstruts.com.
Welcome back. Lawmakers in Washington are fiercely debating comprehensive immigration reform, but it appears the public is not closely following that debate. A Pew Research poll shows only 44% say they're paying close attention. 38% say they don't have an opinion on the Senate measure. Reverend Samuel Rodriguez sits on the evangelical immigration table. Recently, Heather Sells asked Reverend Rodriguez about the progress and the pitfalls on the path to immigration reform.
What is your take on this bipartisan measure in the Senate?
I support it. I had the privilege of standing behind Marco Rubio on the day that he unveiled the proposal before the cameras. I completely support it. I think it's a way to reconcile both the rule of law and the compassionate values that we hold near and dear.
Mm-hmm. Now, some are suggesting, hey, we don't know if we can pass comprehensive reform. Let's take this piecemeal. What is your thought on that?
The piecemeal idea that has been brought forth ever since McCain-Kennedy, post-McCain-Kennedy, it won't work. Only a comprehensive comprehensive strategy has any sort of viability. Democrats that right now control the Senate will support only a comprehensive plan, and the majority of Democrats, of course, and a limited amount of Republicans are inclined to support a comprehensive plan on the House side. Piecemeal won't work. It's not going to solve the problem of 11 million undocumented individuals currently in the country.
And is that your main concern, is those 11 million?
It is. That's the primary concern. We need to protect our borders. The sovereignty of our nation is at stake. There's a narco-trafficking war in northern Mexico. We have a right to protect our border. We don't want to provide amnesty. We need to integrate 11 million people. I'm a pastor. 38 to 40% of our congregations west of the Mississippi for Latino evangelical churches are full of undocumented individuals. As a pastor, as a preacher, I want to make sure they get integrated as expeditiously as possible. I don't want to have any more parishioners living in fear on Sunday morning. I want them to have hope and faith and provide some sort of avenue for their children to fulfill the American dream.
Yeah, and that brings up the interesting attitude of evangelicals on this issue. You know, more and more evangelicals are rubbing shoulders with some of these undocumented folks. How are you seeing attitudes among evangelicals at this point in time on the issue of immigration reform?
Radical change. From 2006, one of the groups, if not the group most vehemently opposed to immigration reform, white evangelicals. In 2013, 7 years later, this group is now leading the charge. I find it to be prophetic and biblical and just a wonderful thing. And it's happened through relationships. It hasn't happened through any sort of national media campaign, but through Latino evangelical pastors meeting with other pastors in their communities, and through these pastors looking at individuals through the optics of Matthew 25, welcoming the stranger. Tremendous change, and now white evangelicals are leading the charge for comprehensive immigration reform.
I want to ask you about one specific proposal that just came up where the LGBT community is saying, hey, on this immigration reform issue, we want to allow gay Americans to sponsor a partner via a green card. Is that a deal breaker for you?
These two issues should never, ever, ever, ever mix. Should never be mixed. Should never be combined. It will dilute, it will fracture a coalition that includes the Hispanic Evangelical Association, Southern Baptists, other major denominations that have signed on to comprehensive immigration reform, including the Catholic Bishops' Conference. We will all pull out. So is it a deal breaker? Yes, it's a deal breaker, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to be in a practical manner included in any bill that will arrive at the president's desk.
Okay, and timeline-wise, momentum-wise, where do you see things going with this bill?
You know, we're looking at between now and sometime in September, worst case scenario, early October at the president's desk, all things being equal. Senate, we're looking at passage in the Senate. The difficulty will be the House. The House will push back on some of the Senate components, particularly on the issue of citizenship, some of these triggers with border security. There's some angst and consternation there that has to be addressed as expeditiously as possible. We're looking at a timeline between now and late September.
All right, Reverend Rodriguez, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Up next, why your own trash may be putting lives at risk.
In 2008, my husband Gary departed for heaven. I was still grieving. And then to find out I had cancer, I began praying, God, how do I do this? Where do I do this? Cancer Treatment Centers of America was the place. Dr. Neelam outlined a plan that would take care of my mind and my body, and she prayed with me.
For Bible-believing Christians, we're able to pray with them in a much deeper way as they begin to really rely upon their faith.
At Cancer Treatment Centers of America, we believe in the power of faith and prayer as indispensable allies in the fight against complex and advanced stage cancer.
I'm back in Telluride on the mountain skiing. I feel strong and healthy.
Advanced medicine and technology.
And I am a survivor.
The warm embrace of the Spirit and the power of prayer.
These are happy tears.
Please go to cancercenter.com/faith. Appointments available now. Cancer Treatment Centers of America. Care that never quits.
Jim is 38, mortgage, married, 3 great kids. He wants to protect his family with a $500,000 term life insurance policy. What do you think it'll cost him? $100 a month? 60? 40? Actually, none of the above. Jim can get a $500,000 policy from a highly rated insurer for under $19 a month. His secret? SelectQuote. SelectQuote is impartial. They'll comparison shop the pick of insurance companies like these to give you a choice of your best prices. SelectQuote has great savings on term life for women, too. Jim's wife, Deidre, can get a $500,000 policy for under $16 a month. SelectQuote has helped make term life insurance affordable for hundreds of thousands of people since 1985. How about you? Just call this number or go to SelectQuote.com. SelectQuote. We shop, you save.
You can't see it, smell it, or taste it, but methane gas is around and it can be explosive. Landfills and dump sites are a primary source of methane. That's why our own trash can can put lives at risk if it's not properly maintained. Americans produce a lot of trash. In 2010, the EPA says Americans threw away about 250 million tons of it. All that decomposing waste produces the toxic gas known as methane. In fact, landfills are the third largest source of methane emissions in the country.
Decomposing trash doesn't just disappear, it transforms. Like all forms of matter, it goes into a different state. One of those states is gas, methane gas, carbon dioxide is another.
Here's why environmental advocate Fred Tutman says you should care. If a landfill or dump site isn't properly built or maintained, methane can escape and invade basements or enclosed spaces of nearby homes and buildings.
It can cause problems that no one ever considered or even dreamed of when this stuff was originally put in the ground.
Perhaps the biggest problem?
It's enough to say that methane can make things go boom.
If it had accumulated in a space where there was an ignition source, and the homes behind us, there's pilot lights for your water heater, for your heater itself. So those are sources of ignition. A hot radiator, you pull your car in your garage. Those types of hazards that in the house would be your typical flame that could ignite those things.
Mick Butler is the chief of the Environmental Division at Fort Meade, Maryland. He and other leaders at this Army post know all too well what it's like to face methane as an enemy. As a safety precaution, they evacuated 20 homes at Fort Meade. Due to the ongoing battle with methane and explosion concerns, these homes have sat empty for 8 years.
It was something that we never thought that we would ever have to deal with. But I had the full confidence in the team here at Fort Meade and our housing partner. We did the right thing. We made the right decision.
Underneath this Fort Meade field, officials discovered a World War II-era dump site. While its leftover artifacts painted a picture of the mid-1940s, it also contained a lot of methane-generating trash.
The operational practice at that time was simply, for landfilling, was to dig a hole and put your waste in the hole. That was the standard of practice at the time.
To comply with the EPA, today's landfills must include a liner to prevent methane and other hazardous materials from leaking into the soil, groundwater, pipes, and buildings. During the 40s, that wasn't the case. So as you can imagine, methane levels spiked around the field.
My feelings were really quite profound. My job is to ensure the safety and protection of the community here. And I really felt it personally that it was important to do something permanent as quickly as possible.
That included evacuating families because of the potential for explosions. And since methane can make people sick, the trash needed to go too. Around 27,000 tons or 1,000 truckloads. Workers then capped off the historic landfill and converted it to green space. The total cost, $2.5 million. Leaders at Fort Meade believe it's worth it.
You could not get any more high on a list of concerns than a site adjacent to a family housing area and an elementary school. So as a father, as a person, you know, the safety of those occupants was prime on your list, and it couldn't have gotten any worse for us to have this location here in that close proximity.
So what are some solutions to prevent methane from landfills from harming people and the environment? At the landfill behind me, the methane that's generated from decaying trash is reclaimed or harnessed and then used to heat another area facility.
Some sites now are actually harvesting the gas because there's an opportunity to use this flammable, combustible gas to generate energy, power, run automobiles, for power generation, basically.
Generally, it's either electricity of some type, putting it back on the grid, or using it to run buildings that are located close by.
Regardless if it's eventually harnessed and reused, methane needs to be properly contained and controlled. As they continue to monitor methane levels around this grassy field, environmental leaders at Fort Meade hope to eventually put people back in these homes. They see this project as a true success story, but at the same time, advise you to educate yourself. Visit state and local websites to find out if a landfill or dump site near your home is truly secure. And don't be afraid to talk with local, city, and federal officials about the landfill near you. It could mean the difference between life and death if methane is involved. Up next, we'll look at George Washington's legacy of prayer. Stay with us.
Attention sleep apnea patients. Are you tired of the expense and hassle of getting your CPAP and BiPAP supplies? Are you fed up with dealing with ill-fitting, leaking, or worn-out masks and straps? Are you worried about the effects that unsanitary tubes, cushions, and filters have on your health? If you said yes to any of these questions, Allied Medical Supply Network has the solution to your problems. You could qualify to have your supplies regularly delivered right to your door at little or no cost to you. That's right, no more inconvenience, no worn-out masks and straps, no more unsanitary equipment, just restful sleep. Call Allied Medical Supply Network today to determine if you may qualify to receive your fresh, brand-name supplies at little or no cost. Don't delay. Call us now to see if you are eligible to save money on regular delivery of your CPAP and BiPAP supplies. Call 1-800-815-9947. That's 1-800-815-9947. Or go to cpapsupplyhelpline.com.
If you are age 85 or younger, call 1-800-520-1922 now.
To learn more about the Senior Care Plan from Senior Life Insurance Company. The average funeral now costs over $7,500, but the most government benefits will pay your family is only $255, leaving your loved ones to pay your debt. The Senior Care Plan will pay up to $30,000 for funeral and other final expenses. There is no medical exam, and you'll have lifetime coverage. Your rates will never increase, your benefits will never decrease, and your plan cannot be canceled by Senior Life. To receive free information about the Senior Care Plan and its benefits,
call 1-800-520-1922 now.
Also receive information about a free prescription discount card by calling now. You have no obligation. Operators are standing by. Call now.
Thanks for staying with us. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill turned the People's House into a house of prayer Wednesday. They asked for humility and wisdom as they made decisions that affect the country. They also prayed that God would bless the nation so America can be a blessing to the rest of the world. The event honors the first inauguration of George Washington and his devotion to daily prayer. It featured brief history lessons about Washington from guests like former House Speaker Newt Gingrich and Christian author Eric Metaxas. Nearly 225 years after Washington's inaugural prayer, they warned today that religious liberties are under attack.
If we lose religious freedom, if a secular orthodoxy rises and begins to force people of faith to keep their faith in the shadows, just in that building on Sunday morning, but once you come out, you have to bow to the secular orthodoxy. Once that happens, you understand that we can no longer be America.
The service was held in Statuary Hall in the Capitol, which served as a church for lawmakers in the 1800s. They should turn it back into a church. You can watch the entire event by visiting our website at cbnnews.com. Well, that's all for this edition of NewsWatch. Remember, you can email us your comments and questions at newswatch@cbn.com. Hope you'll join us next time. Have a great evening.